good, my people? It's Barack Lesnar of Barack Lesnar Hoops, and I have a great video for you today. What is this video? What are we going to discuss? Well, I gave a sneak peek, probably my favorite fantasy basketball community on the internet. There's a few good ones, but I really like the Reddit fantasy basketball community. Shout out to you if you're there from Reddit fantasy basketball. Comment below and let me know if you're from there. Much love for you on this channel always. Why do I have much love for Reddit fantasy basketball? A lot of knowledgeable people, really knowledgeable people, really great information, just really logical. Not a lot of toxic people. Reddit can be a very toxic place, and Reddit fantasy basketball is one of the most supportive communities I have been in. Yes, there are a few haters, not going to lie to you, but over the years, they seem to have died down some. I think there's been such a huge break from fantasy basketball ever since the season got canceled back in March that people are just happy for it to be back. I definitely am happy for it to be back, and I know so are you. You've been watching hours of me talking about fantasy basketball, so that must mean you're really excited. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, as that helps me a lot. We're already at over 1,100 subscribers. Can we make it 2,000 before the season starts? I have a really good feeling that we can, and man, would that be exciting. I'm rocking my Ben Simmons jersey today. I wanted for this video to give you, think of this as the rules of fantasy basketball. These are my rules. So if you took a brand new person who has never played before, and if I could break down all of my experience, all of my lessons, everything I've learned into one concise Reddit, these are my rules. If you try to follow these as closely as possible, I don't care if this is your first year playing. If this is your first year playing fantasy basketball, by the way, please comment below and let me know. I want to know. But if this is your first year playing fantasy basketball, I want you to be able to read these and just go into your draft with an understanding of what it is that you need to do. And ultimately, my number one goal is to remove the noise. When you're in your draft and you see all those player names, your eyes can glaze over because you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, who do I pick? There's so many options. You recognize this name, you recognize that name. That guy has great rebounds. That guy has great steals. That guy has great points. Who do you pick? I try to teach you strategies to remove all the noise. That's what I try to do. So if you haven't started reading the background behind me, we're going to go through this list, all right? Rule A, target unicorns, which I tell you guys all the time. So centers traditionally have bad free throw percentage. They don't hit threes. They don't get assists. Someone like Nikola Jokic, being the opposite of that, is what allows you to build some really strong teams because you still get the rebounding from him, but he's giving you assists. He's still giving you some degree of three-pointers. He's giving you really good free throw percentage. Those are things you typically do not expect from a big man. So by picking him, you can build a really strong team because now you're still getting traditional big man stats, but you're not starting at a disadvantage with your free throw percentage. So you add a few more players to build on that. It just makes your team so strong. Someone else I can think of is Drew Holiday. Gets you really high field goal percentage, get you a lot of steals, get you close to a block. Point guards traditionally are not the players who are going to produce blocks for you. They're just not. So what happens in that situation, I may grab guards that get me out of position blocks because then I can maybe target someone like Domantas Sabonis or Nikola Jokic who doesn't get me a ton of blocks and still be decent in the category. When you find these unicorns that are able to produce in just categories that traditionally their position does not produce in, that just helps you a whole lot. Sorry about that. Baby crying upstairs. Terrible twos. Can be a little intolerable, but I love the little guy. But let's move on. B of my rules for fantasy basketball. Target players. Target. No. Over there. B. Target players with a really good assist to turnover ratio. I find that being top 3 to 4 in your league in both assists and turnovers is preferable than being number 1 in assists and dead last in turnovers. Keep that in mind. Assist is normally my punt category of choice, but I normally target guys that can still get me assists while having a low turnover ratio. And then we could go right here, check out that website. Shout out to teamrankings.com where I pulled this up. And it just shows you some of the best assist to turnover ratio players in the league. A lot of them are role players who play limited minutes, and that's going to skew things. But here you see Dylan Wright, Ricky Rubio, Alfred Payton. Who else? Who are some other people here? Malcolm Brogdon, DJ Augustine, George Hill, Jalen Brunson. These are all guys that are obtainable. Joe Ingles. Let's keep going through the list. Tomas Satoransky. Just drafted him yesterday in one of my leagues. Draymond Green. Luke Kennard. Jeff Teague with a 2.7 assist to turnover ratio. Devontae Graham. I don't feel too great about his value this year, but we'll see how he does. He may get that starting 2 role on that team and still do well for himself. Jimmy Butler is somebody else with a great assist to turnover ratio. Chris Dunn. LeBron James, Spencer Dinwiddie, Markelle Fultz, Kyrie Irving. Let's keep going down the list. Will Barton, Nikola Vucevic, Kemba Walker, Kyle Anderson, who I've added to my sleepers list. He had a really strong game last night, and I really think I want to add him to my sleeper list, especially if he's going to get those minutes while Jaren Jackson Jr. is gone. He has that sweet field goal percentage along with his ability to get assists, steals, and blocks. Makes him a unicorn, as I referenced before. And we can keep looking through this assist to turnover guides. There's DeMar DeRozan, Jamal Murray. Aaron Gordon's actually pretty good. Aaron Gordon has a better assist to turnover ratio than Ben Simmons. CJ McCollum, Lonzo Ball, Tobias Harris, Eric Bledsoe, Drew Holiday. Just keep going through this list. If you're able to grab some of these guys, you're going to get a boost in your assist and not really hurt your turnovers, okay? So I hope that sinks in. So my rule C was target players who are 30 and younger and still on the upswing versus players currently on their downward trajectories. That doesn't mean you only have to grab guys that are younger than 30, but if you have a roster that has 5 or 6 guys that are 31, 32, and facing the downswing of their production, that means their numbers are declining year over year versus going up year over year. That can be very dangerous and limits your upside potential. How can you have upside if your guys are on the decline? It's just something that doesn't logically make sense. And fantasy basketball is actually a very logical sport. Are we calling it a sport? A sport simulation? It's not really a sport simulation. What are we calling it? A nerd hobby? A nerd hobby. It's a very logical nerd hobby. Alright, so D is target guards who get lots of steals and blocks. High free throw percentage, good field goal percentage is a bonus. This is related again to A, target those unicorns. To me, that's considered a unicorn when you have a guard that's getting you a lot of blocks. But in this situation, we're adding steals and we're adding high free throw percentage. And if they get good field goal percentage too, that's a bonus. It's really rare to find a guy who's going to get you all of them. That's why Stephen Curry for a while was a number 1 or 2 fantasy basketball player, because he really helped you with your points, helped you with your assists, got great steals, and his percentages were amazing considering how many threes he hit. He was an anomaly and definitely a unicorn, which is why he's a 2-time MVP. F. Do not over-rely on veterans on lottery teams or veterans on super top seeds because of the danger of end-of-season rest. So an example is, let's say you draft a guy from the Clippers, or you draft several guys from, let's say, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Bucks, those teams that you know are almost assured to win close to 60 games. What ends up happening is, since they're secured in their playoff spot, they're going to rest those guys towards the end of the season. And what happens towards the end of the season? Your fantasy basketball playoffs. So if you have a team loaded with those guys, you're going to get rest games in the middle of your fantasy playoffs, and that could completely annihilate you. Now, on the other side of the coin, you also have guys that are veterans on lottery teams. So let's say an Otto Porter Jr. on the Chicago Bulls. Let's say it's towards the end of the season. and the Bulls have a 20-win record, there's absolutely no chance of them making the playoffs, and you have Otto Porter Jr., chances are they are going to sit him and rest him and let young guys play. That's what we call funny season, because suddenly no-name players are getting a ton of usage and winning people fantasy basketball playoffs. So keep that in mind. G, punt. Do not try to be great at all 9 categories, because that is the way to build a super mediocre team. You want to base your punt on your first pick. I stress this always, and you see this often with the teams I put together. If I pick Harden, I am not going to punt assist. If I pick AD, I'm not going to punt blocks and percentages. You want to build to their strengths. You don't want to neuter their strengths, because then why even pick them with your first pick if you're not going to build off of the things that make them the first pick? It just doesn't make logical sense. Again, this is a very logical game. You build off of their strengths and then you punt their weaknesses. So again, if I'm going to pick Harden, I'm going to punt field goal percentage and turnovers. If I pick AD, I'm going to punt threes and assists. But if I'm Harden, I'm not going to punt threes and assists. Okay? And if I'm AD, I'm not going to punt my field goal percentage or my free throw percentage or my blocks, because those are the things that make him elite. Build off of the things that make him elite. Now I want to show you guys. Well, I won't show you. I'll just tell you. Somebody commented in this thread and said, punting is stupid. And it just shows that it's a... I honestly don't know what they were getting. I did ask for clarification. I don't expect clarification. But honestly, if you're going into fantasy basketball with the mentality that punting is stupid, you must be playing a points league. Because even if you're not purposely punting, you're punting. Because it's impossible to be great in every category. So you either choose to punt or you just choose to be mediocre in every single category. You make your choice. You have the option of just being mediocre in every single category, and any team on any given week can beat you in 5 of the categories because you're just decent at all of them and not great at any. And there's just no way around it. If you want to be really good in a specific set of categories, you have to be really bad in others. It's like a seesaw. It's like a seesaw. There's no way to put 500 pounds on one side, put 100 pounds on the other side, and have it balanced. There's just absolutely no way to do that. So my counter was, I would love any proof, but if we had any way of running some experiment of teams that build with no punt versus teams that build with a solid punt, I can guarantee you the win percentage of the teams with a solid punt is through the roof. I have no doubt about it. My success speaks for itself. I go almost into every league with the mentality that I'm going to win. And if I don't end up winning, there's too many variables where you can guarantee a win. I guarantee you 90% of the time I'm in the top 3, because these rules do not change. And if I were to suddenly implement in my head that punting is stupid and I'm not going to do it, I guarantee you my success would plummet, because it just does not work. It just makes you, there's no perfect player. Your team is just a reflection of the players that you have. What player is perfect? The fact that technically each player's value has a punt. AD, he punts assists. Just naturally. He's not a thing he's going to really help you with. But he's going to get you great blocks. He's going to get you great steals, great rebounding, great scoring, and great percentages. So where are these perfect players that are perfectly balanced and just great at everything? They don't exist. Even LeBron James, one of the greatest players, has a really poor free throw percentage. Shaq, really poor free throw percentage. He's not a guy that hit threes. Steph Curry, he's not a guy that's going to get you 10 rebounds a game. Russell Westbrook, who could get you 10 rebounds per game, gets you really bad field goal percentage. So to know that each player has these weaknesses, and instead of unifying their strengths, building a team where you unify their strengths, and you unify their weaknesses and just say, I'm going to disregard this category, but I'm going to unify the strengths of my entire team. It's an insane comment to me. It makes no sense. If somebody can logically explain to me in the comments how punting is stupid, I would love to hear it. And if you do want to go there, please explain to me what your alternative to a punt is. So if you're telling people not to punt, or you don't believe in punting, what is the alternative if you want to build a dominant winning team? And then list the team below. And then let's analyze that team, because I can guarantee you, guess what? You're going to be weak in at least 2 to 3 of those categories. And whether you did it on purpose or not, you have 1 or 2 options. You either accidentally punted a team that's solid, or you're just bad in every category, like my team in the do not draft list. And I'll remind you, that team had Russell Westbrook. That team had LeBron James. Okay? That team had Zion Williamson, had Kemba Walker, had a ton of great NBA players, and I was dead last in projections because the fit was suspect. I was just bad in every category, mediocre in every category, and I was really good in assists. Yet the team was awful, terrible. That's what happens when you don't punt. I did not punt in that draft, and I still grabbed players with a ton of name value, and that was the end result. Sorry to go on a tangent there. That flustered me. H. Do not grab multiple injury-prone players. Availability is the best ability. If you're grabbing multiple guys like Kyrie, John Wall, Kevin Durant, Gordon Hayward, Kristaps Porzingis, DeMarcus Cousins, Blake Griffin, etc., you're going to struggle the entire season. It's just a fact. Of course, health is never guaranteed, ever, for any player, no matter if they're an Iron Man. Karl Anthony Towns had not missed a playoff. He had not missed a game since high school, and the last 2 seasons he's been missing games. Health is not a guarantee. But there are players that just have proven track records of being able to take the grind of the NBA season, and they don't miss long stretches year after year. Targeting those players is ideal. So if a guy misses 2 to 3 months every single season, you really want to consider taking a chance at maybe 1 or 2 of those guys at most. Sure, you can take a swing for the fences and say, I'm going to take Blake Griffin. Fine. You could draft him pretty low. But if you want to pair him with Stephen Curry or several of these other guys on the list that are dealing with either nagging injuries or normally get injured every season, you're going to set yourself up for failure, because you're not going to be able, especially when it's your top picks. When you're taking Kyrie in the second round, for example, it's just very hard to find production to replace that from the waiver wire. It'll be almost impossible. In category leagues, in my opinion, protecting your percentages, steals, blocks, turnovers, while being mindful of threes and points is the way to destroy everyone. Okay? Everyone. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the categories that I'm asking you to be mindful in. So which ones are the ones you're punting? I think you're punting assists. You're punting rebounds. Normally a light punt, not a heavy punt. I'm normally not the worst in rebounding. I've been asked before why I don't target rebounders. Well, a lot of the double-digit rebounders in the NBA are just incredibly flawed, unless you grab them in the top 10. There's a few you could grab later on. There's Nurkic, there's John Collins, who really don't help you. Don't hurt you in your percentages, but for the most part, a lot of the guys that help you in rebounding tend to hurt you in free throw percentage, but I'm protecting my free throw percentage. I choose to protect my free throw percentage more than I choose to be really great at rebounding. That's just what works for me. Experiment, and maybe you'll find a category that works better for you. But like I told you before, my do not draft team, which was dead last in the league, was number 1 in assist, which in my opinion is a reflection of just how flawed a lot of the guys that get you assists are, and how much they can hurt you in other categories because you're so focused on being good at assists. If you're picking a James Harden to start or a Nikola Jokic to start, I'm not telling you to ignore assists completely. You don't want to do that. But that's why I recommend, if you can be in the top half in assists, not necessarily 1 or 2 or 3 in assists, but in the top half, maybe 4 or 5, and still be in the bottom half of your league in turnovers, in my opinion, that makes you a lot stronger, because then you get to pick guys who don't hurt you as much but are still chipping in a couple of assists while keeping your turnover low. K. Actually, no. J. And this is a very, very important one. Be willing to question convention and narratives. Many people parrot what they hear without fully considering the logic behind it. Always question. Question these rules I'm telling you right now. Question the things I tell you on this channel. And you know what I'll do? I will answer your questions. And I will tell you if I feel you're wrong. I will tell you why I feel that you're wrong. And if I'm not able to do that, then maybe I need to question why I believe or what I'm telling you something. Question everything, okay? Make sure the decisions you make sense to you and don't act purely out of fear of missing out. Okay? I know it's easy to read Roto World or read these other websites or even see me and think I have some sort of credibility that you don't have, and I don't. I realized this a few years ago. I was invited to join a website to be a fantasy basketball contributor called Roto Ballers. They did give me an opportunity. But I remember thinking to myself, why do I need them? They need me more than I need them. They don't make me a fantasy expert. They market me as a fantasy expert. I wasn't there very long. I think I wrote like one article. They present me as a fantasy expert, but I don't need them to be a fantasy expert. I know I'm a fantasy expert because my results speak for themselves, and I believe in myself and my strategies. And that's what I want you guys to feel. Now, here I am with my own channel, my own brand, and I don't have to answer to somebody else. I don't have to make somebody else look good. I get to make my own self look good. And that's what I want you guys to do as well. Trust your own instincts. Speaking of trusting your instincts, K is trust your instincts and the team that you drafted. It can be very tempting on opening night. I guarantee you it's going to happen on opening night. When a guy you believe in has a terrible game, okay? Just has a terrible game. And then somebody that you weren't even thinking of drops 35 points that very first game. Has this happened to you? I want you to think of it as the stock market equivalent of selling low to buy high. So that's like selling one of your stocks that's at really low because let's say it crashed. So you sell it and you take a loss. And then you buy a stock that's been going up for months and suddenly that one crashes on you. That is how you wipe out your team. Just like you wipe out your stock portfolio, that is the way to wipe out your team. Trust these guys. Trust in their instincts. If you get Nikola Jokic, a guy who traditionally kind of has a bit of a slow start, and the first month you feel, wow, he's just not producing at a top 5 level where I expected him, do not trade him for peanuts. Do not do it. Because what's going to happen is a month after that, he's going to heat up. He's going to be mid-season form. He's getting triple doubles every other game. And he's on some other guy's team who traded you some guys that were hot at that moment, but have now cooled off and regressed back to their mean of being average, while Nikola Jokic regressed back, not regressed, but progressed to his mean of being a beast because he was underperforming. Do not make that mistake. As I mentioned, Jokic, Jamal Murray, Ricky Rubio are players in my experience with fantasy basketball that traditionally tend to start slow, but towards the end of the season put up like top fantasy basketball production. Those sort of players you want to hold on and trust your instincts, trust history, the fact that these guys have performed, and hold on to your studs. Don't be the guy that traded your studs for pump and dumps. Sunk cost theory. Learn about it and do not fall for it. Sunk cost theory is the belief because you've already invested so much in something that you just have to invest more so that what you've already spent into it isn't wasted. That is a psychological phenomenon. I'm not a psychological expert by any means, but it's a phenomena that definitely happens with fantasy basketball. It's a little contradictory to K, but you don't want to hold on to guys that are hurting your team for months at a time because you feel the need to justify, well, I used a top 50 pick on them. But all season so far, we're 2 or 3 months in of waiting, and they're producing at a top 200 level. At some point, you got to know when to hold them, and you got to know when to fold them. And knowing when to fold them is really important. An example I can think of, a few years ago, I drafted Andrew Wiggins with a top 70 pick. I thought he might have a great season. and he started killing my percentages, and my team was doing awful. And I said, this guy is hurting me. I don't believe in him anymore. And I dropped him and picked up this rookie that just had a string of really nice games. His name was Donovan Mitchell. The rest is history. Donovan Mitchell is now drafted in the top 25, and Andrew Wiggins is still going in that 70 to 80 range. So again, you got to know when to hold them, and you got to know when to fold them. And something I tell you all the time, you want to create a scarcity of big men and point guards in your league. You want to target 4 to 5 of each. Now, you want to target ones that have multiple positions. So by that I mean ones that have power forward, center, as opposed to just center eligibility. Because if you grab just 5 point guard eligible players and 5 center eligible players, that only leaves you 3 slots in which to get 3 to 4 small forwards, 3 to 4 shooting guards, 3 to 4 power forwards. You don't want to do that. So at most, I'd say you only want to grab perhaps 1 to 2 center only eligible players or point guard eligible only players. These guys with multiple positions are so valuable, because it's happened to me where, because I don't have flexibility with my positions, I have to sit a guy on the bench instead of playing him because he doesn't fit in any of my roster slots. So I tend to avoid getting myself in that situation, because no matter how great a player is, if he's on your bench, he's not producing for you. So don't put yourself in that situation and just draft with no concern for the roster slot. And in your head, you're like, oh, well, he's a good center. But you now have 5 different centers with no power forward eligibility, and you can't play them in the power forward slot. Great thing about creating that scarcity of point guards and big men is that once the season starts, there are going to be teams that did not draft enough big men or point guards. And guess what's going to happen? They're going to overvalue your assets. So overvaluing your assets means that maybe you can spare now one of your dope point guards or one of your dope centers and get a really valuable forward that makes your team stronger. So maybe Eric Bledsoe performs well, and the guy that has Tobias Harris is short on point guards, and Eric Bledsoe has a string of solid games. Maybe I offer him Eric Bledsoe for Tobias Harris, and I end up getting Tobias Harris, who's a better fit overall with my team. That is very possible. So something to keep in mind when you guys propose trades, and listen to me, it's very crucial that you listen to me here. Don't only worry about what helps your team, period. Just one bad trade offer can make that person shut the door on you for the rest of the season. Have you ever played 2K when you keep offering a really bad trade in my GM mode and they're like, just don't call me anymore? That can happen to you as well. There's absolutely no need why you have to be that selfish. It's just not necessary. On to my next point. It is not true that every trade has a winner or a loser. That's not true. There are many instances of win-win trades. How do you do this? You have to study every team as if they're your own team. If you have lots of centers but need a point guard, is there a team with point guards that are short on bigs? A trade would easily be mutually beneficial to both parties. So you need to find the teams that are almost built the opposite of your team. If your strengths are their weaknesses and they don't want that to be a weakness, that presents an opportunity for you to gain some of that value back in a trade. But if you make insulting trades where you're just trying to get, let's say you want Jokic and then you offer them Christian Wood and Otto Porter Jr. and in your head you think that's a good trade offer, you're not only are you going to get every trade offer declined, it's just very likely people are just not going to want to interact with you. I will say I can be pretty, sometimes I can overvalue my players and I can try to get a little extra out of a guy in trades. So I may be a little bit of a hypocrite there, but I've learned from that to try to be reasonable when trading and get out of your mentality that every trade needs to have a winner or a loser. Get that out of your mind. Look for win-win trades, and they definitely exist. Now, O. Sorry, that's O is just what we did. P. When using the waiver wire, apply a bit of what have you done for me lately and filter by the last 2 to 4 weeks. If you're doing your filtering and just only looking at their production for the season, you might miss out on players who have started heating up and are ready to break out. You might miss out on the guy that's really been having a great, just outperforming his season-long numbers over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Those are the guys you want to identify because their coaching staff may be noticing that. Their general manager may be noticing that. The team owner may be noticing that. And that could lead to opportunity. So I normally don't base it just off the season-long value, but also what they've been doing over the last few weeks. My biggest rule would be to process and understand that being the best in real life does not make you the best in fantasy basketball. When I started playing, Shawn Marion was the #1 fantasy basketball player despite never being close to the best player in the league. There can be a huge overlap. For example, Anthony Davis has an argument for being the best fantasy basketball player and the best player in real life. James Harden may not be the best player in the league, but he's in the discussion. And he's one of the best fantasy players. Same thing with Giannis, same thing with Steph Curry. So there is overlap, but it's not always necessarily the case. Back then, a lot of people would rather choose Kobe Bryant than Shawn Marion, and it would be silly because Kobe Bryant was not as good a fantasy basketball player as Shawn Marion, even though you would be hard-pressed to find somebody who would argue that Shawn Marion was a better basketball player in real life than Kobe Bryant. And as a bonus, I have some bonus rules for you guys. I hope everything I've said is sinking in so far. With differences in games played between you and your opponents, field goal and free throw percentage are much less reliant on overall games played that week. So if you have low turnover players and you manage to be dominant in steals and blocks, the scarcity that you've created in those steals and blocks will give you a legitimate chance of winning field goal percentage, free throw percentage, turnover, steals, and blocks any given week, even if you're playing less games. Because those, for example, field goal and free throw percentage just aren't really based on the number of games played. They're an average. So you want to keep that in mind, because even if you're playing 9 games less that week, or your guys are injured, by you being mindful of your percentages and your turnovers at the very worst, you might be able to win 3 categories instead of just getting swept that week. And being mediocre in every category, by the way, is a very good way to get swept. Just keep that in mind. All right, so S. Focusing on points, rebounds, assists over the other categories, it's what the herd tends to focus on. Meaning these players leave the board very early on, and everyone is competing for those resources. Instead, I focus on the ones above, since they tend to be the ones that are neglected by other owners. Other owners tend to neglect those other categories and seem to think that only points, rebounds, and assists, sometimes steals and blocks, but mostly points, rebounds, and assists, they seem to think that that's all that matters. And that is a very dangerous mentality to have. If you absolutely have to punt one of your efficiency categories, like I told you before, make it only one and aim to be the best in the league at the other one. Even if you punt it, be mindful of it and try to be middle of the league versus worst. Okay, so just because you decide to punt field goal percentage, hopefully you can make it so you're average as opposed to the worst in the league at it. Just because the percentages are so valuable, and by being closer to average on any given week, just with variation, you might be able to pull off field goal percentage. But if you're going in with an average of like 42 or 43% field goal, it's going to be really hard to win that category consistently. I now tend to avoid, because of this, I tend to avoid punt free throw builds, because those builds, there's several issues with punt free throw builds, for example. I recommend them if you pick someone like Giannis, but the issue is people tend to like that as a punt build, so they'll target all of the guys you want, and you'll see them getting picked off before you're able to pick them. And then once all those guys get taken, you just end up with a really bad punt free throw build where you're just grabbing like a guy like Jacob Poeltl with bad free throw percentage to be your second center, because all the other ones got picked up before you had a chance. You want to avoid that. I tend to avoid. I routinely choose to be mediocre in points, rebounds, and really bad at assists. But I feel that when I do that, it just opens the game up for me so much more, because now guys that don't get a ton of assists, like Robert Covington, but they can get me a ton of steals and blocks, become super appealing. If you're really worried about your assists, you might see, oh, Robert Covington doesn't get me assists, and ignore the amazing potential of his steals and blocks and how much that can help you. Make sure you're aware of the specific settings for your league. That is a crucial one. If your league changes three-pointers made to three-point percentage, like happened with the video I just uploaded last night, what ends up happening is, if you don't have that in mind, you could draft a completely wrong team. You might draft a bunch of three-point percentage killers, and you've lost that category because you weren't mindful of that. Another league format that's popular, I've seen leagues where they add offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, and then they make like total rebounds. So if you're in a league that has 3 rebounding categories, a guy like Andre Drummond probably should not leave the top 12, because based on those categories, he has a ton of value. So you don't want to draft with a one-size-fits-all approach. You want to be sure you're paying attention to the categories of your specific league before you draft. Go look at those categories and make sure you know what they are, so that you're drafting to the strengths of those categories. The good thing with Yahoo is, if you click the rank, and somebody left this comment a few weeks ago and really made that clear to me, if you press the rank button to sort by rank on your Yahoo draft, it's going to show you, based on the specific categories in your league, which players are the best as far as that ranking is concerned. And that's it. Those are my rules. I got up through to you, and I also shared these rules on my personal Brock Lesnar Hoops Fantasy Basketball Facebook group. I've left a link in the description, and I also have a comment which I've pinned, because I really want to grow that group, and I want to start a great fantasy basketball community. There's a lot of good fantasy basketball communities on Facebook, but I really want to create one with you guys, because I love you guys. And if you go there now, I am actually collecting funds right now, $25 buy-in. You want to play against Brock Lesnar in one of his leagues? Well, I'm going to give you the opportunity, but the only way you're going to get that opportunity is to join that Facebook group. If you're not joining that Facebook group, look at these rules. You see these rules I gave you? These are some quality rules I gave you. Go there. These rules were there yesterday. You could have gotten this information yesterday before this video came out. I want to post my information that I use for my videos there before I make the video. So there's some exclusive content just by coming over to my group. It doesn't cost you anything. I'm just trying really hard to get you guys, your mentality, your knowledge, your know-how, your experience over there, and create the best fantasy basketball community on Facebook. I love Reddit fantasy basketball. If I can create that sort of energy on Brock Lesnar fantasy basketball, I would love that. You don't need to go there and gloat about how great I am. That's not really my intention. I want you guys to come and bring your contributions as well, your knowledge. If you disagree with me, come disagree with me and tell me why. As long as you can respectfully explain why and use logic, I will never be upset at anything that you have to say. But don't be upset if I counter what you say point by point in excruciating detail, because anybody that knows me knows that's how Brock Lesnar rolls. Thank you so much for watching. If you have not yet, do me a favor, and right there, you know it, click that subscribe button for me. Click that like button. Click that like button for me. Turn it blue. Smash it. Smash it. That's what all the famous YouTubers say. They say smash it. So smash it for me. Like I said, I'm trying to get to 2,000 subscribers now, because you guys blew that 1,000 subscriber goal out of the water. So now I want to go for 2,000 subscribers. Can we do that before the fantasy basketball season starts on the 22nd? I believe that we can. I thank you again for watching. Shout out to my boy Keith, by the way. I want to give him a personal shout out. This man watches and comments on all my videos. When I wasn't making videos, this man would comment on my old videos and say, "We miss you, Barack. You need to come back, Barack. I hope you come back, brother." And I want to tell everyone, I freaking love that. I felt so supported, so loved and appreciated, that when I wasn't making videos, somebody would reach out to me, take time out of their life to reach out to a dork like me to say, please come back and make some videos. People like him are so crucial And people like you are so crucial in me doing this. I'm going to make this a goal. I'm going to manifest it into destiny. I will make my living making fantasy basketball content because I love doing it. I love breaking down these strategies, and I love making you better at fantasy basketball. My goal is, when it's all said and done, the level of competition is just through the roof because I've toiled over years. I've toiled and done 40, 50 leagues in a year, over multiple years, to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what strategies have screwed me over, what impulses have messed me up, and what hasn't messed me up. And if I could add one last rule that isn't even there, and it's a very important one in fantasy sports, is don't tinker. All right, guys, until next time, this is Brock Lesnar of Brock Lesnar Hoops.